My father gave the family business to my brother-in-law at his retirement party and called me a disappointment. For years, I believed that I would take over as CEO of my father's lab equipment business. He had built the company from the ground up, and it was well known in the industry. My father had promised me this role for nearly 7 years, grooming me to eventually step into his shoes. I had been working in the company since I graduated from college, dedicating all my time and energy to learning the ins and outs of the business. While it was challenging, I was passionate about the work, and I was proud to think that one day, I would lead the company my father had created. Then, at my father's retirement party, a party I had painstakingly organized to honor his legacy, he made an announcement that shattered my expectations. In front of all our family, friends, and business associates, he declared that my brother-in-law, Zach, would be the new CEO. I was completely blindsided. Not once had my father mentioned that he was considering Zach for the role, let alone made a decision. I stood there in stunned silence, trying to process what I had just heard while everyone else applauded. The shock quickly turned to anger and confusion. Zach? He had only joined the company a year ago, and his background was in marketing, not in the technical or managerial side of the business. I had spent 7 years preparing for this role, working long hours and sacrificing my personal life to ensure I was ready to take over. I had believed, without a doubt, that I was next in line. How could my father make this decision without even discussing it with me? After the party, I confronted my father, demanding an explanation. His response was even more hurtful than the announcement itself. He looked me in the eyes and said, "Zach is more of a son to me than you ever were." Those words cut deep. My father went on to explain that he believed I was mentally weak and therefore unfit to be a leader. He was referring to the fact that I had been diagnosed with general anxiety disorder a few years earlier. Despite the fact that I had been managing my anxiety well with therapy and medication, my father seemed to think that it made me incapable of handling the pressures of being a CEO. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I had never let my anxiety interfere with my work, and I had never shown any signs of being unable to handle responsibility. Yet, my father had decided that this part of me, something I had no control over, disqualified me from the role I had worked so hard for. The feeling of betrayal was overwhelming. This was the man who had always told me that hard work and dedication would pay off, that I was capable of achieving anything I set my mind to. Now, he was telling me that none of that mattered because he saw me as a disappointment. I left the party that night feeling utterly defeated. The next morning, I submitted my resignation. I couldn't stay at a company where I was so blatantly undervalued, where my own father saw me as weak and unworthy. Over the following weeks, I distanced myself from my family. I stopped speaking to my father entirely, and my relationship with my sister also deteriorated. She had always been close to Zach and supported my father's decision, which only deepened the rift between us. The only family member I kept in touch with was my mother. She tried to remain neutral, but it was clear that she was also disappointed in me for not reconciling with my father. She frequently urged me to make peace with him, but I had no interest in doing so. I was too hurt, too angry. For the next 2 years, I focused on building a new life for myself. I found a job in a different industry where I thrived and quickly advanced in my career. It was a relief to be in a place where I was valued for my skills and where my mental health wasn't seen as a weakness. However, the pain of what had happened with my family never fully went away. It lingered in the background, a constant reminder of the betrayal I had experienced. Then, recently, my mother called me in a panic. She told me that Zach had been arrested for tax fraud and that my father was under investigation due to his previous involvement with the company. My mother was beside herself with worry, fearing that my father could end up in prison. She begged me to speak to my father, to help in any way I could, possibly even to testify for him in court if it came to that. But I refused. I wanted no part in their legal troubles, especially since my father hadn't even reached out to me himself. He was still too proud to ask for my help directly, even when he was in such a dire situation. My mother was furious. She accused me of being selfish, of abandoning my family when they needed me most. She said I was being heartless and that I would regret it if something happened to my father. But I stood by my decision. I told her that after everything that had happened, I wasn't willing to put myself in the middle of this mess. I had moved on with my life, and I didn't want to be dragged back into the chaos that had caused me so much pain. That a week later, my mother called again, this time more upset than ever. She told me that my refusal to help was tearing the family apart and that she couldn't bear to speak to me anymore. After another heated argument, she blocked me. I was stunned. My mother, the only family member I had been in contact with for the past 2 years, had cut me off. I tried to rationalize that I had done nothing wrong, that I was just protecting myself, but the guilt was overwhelming. I felt like I had lost the last connection to my family, and even though I knew I was standing up for myself, it didn't make the situation any easier. Not long after, my sister showed up at my door, clearly distressed. She pleaded with me to help Zach, to use whatever connections I had to bail him out. She knew that one of my bosses was married to a federal judge, and she assumed that I could pull some strings to get Zach out of trouble. I was furious that she would even suggest such a thing. I explained to her that I didn't have the connections she thought I did, and even if I did, I would never compromise my morals or my career for someone who had treated me so poorly. My sister accused me of holding a grudge, of being selfish and vindictive. We ended up having a huge fight, and she left, vowing never to speak to me again. 4 days later, there was a knock on my door. To my surprise, it was my parents. My initial reaction was to refuse to let them in, but my father insisted that he wasn't there to ask for help. He was there to apologize. This was the first time in 2 years that he had acknowledged his mistake. My father, the man who had always been so proud and stubborn, stood on my doorstep, admitting that he had been wrong. He explained that he had been raised to believe that mental health issues were a sign of weakness, and when he learned about my anxiety, he thought I wasn't up to the task of leading the company. But over the past 2 years, he had started to educate himself about anxiety and realized that he might have been wrong. He admitted that he had made a terrible decision and was sorry for the pain he caused me. I was in shock. This was the apology I had been waiting for, but it felt bittersweet. While I appreciated his effort, I wasn't ready to forgive him right away. It wasn't just about what happened 2 years ago. It was also about the fact that it took him this long and so much trouble to realize he had wronged me. I told him I needed time to think, and he respected that. My mother also apologized for her behavior, saying that she had acted too quickly and harshly. She assured me that they were ready to wait for me to come around and forgive them, but they understood if I chose not to. Now, I'm left with a lot to process. On one hand, I'm relieved that my father finally acknowledged his mistake. On the other hand, I'm not sure if I can fully forgive him or if I even want to rebuild my relationship with him and the rest of my family. The pain they caused me runs deep, and it's not something that can be easily forgotten. For now, I'm trying to take things one step at a time and figure out where to go from here. The future feels uncertain, but I'm determined to prioritize my own well-being, no matter what happens.